He came back from his honeymoon, opened his email, and saw a car loan under his name with a forged signature. It wasn't a scammer. It was his sister. When he confronted his dad, the answer was simple. "We raised you. This is the least you could do." This is the story of a man who learned that sometimes love isn't enough, especially when it's used as leverage. Daniel and his wife Rachel had just returned from their brief honeymoon in the Oregon woods. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet few days of campfires, soft rain, and morning coffee under pine trees. A small start to something big. Now they were back, at the house he grew up in, where the porch creaked the same way it always had and the kitchen smelled like cinnamon and old furniture. His mom had cooked too much, of course. His dad was half watching a game in the background. Everyone gathered around the dining table. There were jokes, wine, stories about childhood mishaps. And then, it slipped out. "You're gonna love the new car," Monica said, cutting her mashed potatoes. Daniel paused. "What car?" Monica flicked her eyes toward Josh, their youngest brother, barely out of high school, who grinned sheepishly while twirling car keys in his hand. Rachel, curious, asked, "Whose name is it under?" Monica smiled, a slow, knowing kind of smirk. "Let's just say, someone generous." Everyone laughed. Except Daniel. He forced a chuckle, kept eating. Tried to ignore the twist in his stomach. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe Josh won a scholarship or something. That night, back in his old bedroom, Rachel asleep beside him, curled under the same quilt his grandma made, Daniel checked his email out of habit. Subject: loan confirmation, vehicle purchase. Amount: $38,000. Borrow: Daniel K. Walker. He opened the PDF. His name. A signature that wasn't his. His pulse quickened. He read it again. A 60-month auto loan. A car he didn't drive. And in the cosigner field, Monica Walker, family representative. No panic. Just a long, sinking silence. Daniel closed the laptop slowly and sat back. The familiar ceiling above him now felt foreign. Something shifted in him. Not because of the money, but because of the quiet certainty that this wasn't a mistake. It was planned. And for the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to ask, "If they could do this without telling me, what else have they done, assuming I'd never say no?" The next morning, Daniel told Rachel he needed a walk, some fresh air, clear his head. Instead, he drove back to his parents' house. Alone. He rang the doorbell, and when his mom answered, he smiled politely. "Hey, I think I left my jacket upstairs last night." She waved him in without a thought. "Of course, honey. Check your old room." But Daniel didn't stop on the second floor. He climbed the narrow wooden ladder to the attic, a place he hadn't set foot in since high school. The air was dusty, heavy with insulation and old cardboard. In the corner, stacked neatly beside Christmas boxes and a sewing machine no one used anymore, was a plastic storage bin marked in Sharpie. He opened it slowly, expecting maybe school photos or old report cards. But what he found felt colder. Inside were manila folders, labeled with years. 2019, 2020, 2021. He flipped one open. Printed bank statements. Photocopies of his tax returns. Pay stubs. Investment overviews. Even an old driver's license. Each document had faint pink highlighter marks. Notes scribbled in pencil. He pulled out one folder and noticed a sticky note attached to a printout of a bank login screen. "Check if he changes password, Monica." His breath caught. This wasn't just casual curiosity. This was surveillance. They had been monitoring him, not asking for help, not even pretending to share, just collecting, planning, watching. Daniel sat down on the attic floor, folder in hand, heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, memories of subtle things came rushing back. His mom asking offhand, still using the same Chase account? Monica joking about how Daniel's got that nice credit score. He had laughed with them, trusted them, and here it was. A quiet betrayal, years in the making. He stood up, folder still in hand, and for the first time he wasn't just hurt. He was done being the only one surprised. Daniel chose a quiet cafe near the lake, not too close to home, not too far from it either. He picked the table in the corner, where sunlight filtered in soft and warm, but his stomach still felt cold. Thomas arrived right on time. He greeted his son like nothing had changed, a pat on the back, a casual, "How's married life treating you?" Daniel didn't return the smile. Instead, he reached into his bag and placed a manila folder on the table. Slowly, deliberately he opened it. Inside, printouts, sticky notes, login records, and a photocopy of the $38,000 loan agreement, with Daniel's name, forged signature, and Monica's handwriting in the margins. Thomas's eyes scanned it all, but his face never changed. After a pause, he leaned back, sighing. "We didn't ask for your money, Daniel. We just acted in your best interest. You've always had more than you need. And your brother needed a shot at something." Daniel's voice was steady, but there was a rawness beneath it. "So that meant I didn't deserve privacy either? Or consent?" Thomas shook his head slowly, as if disappointed. "You're being too sensitive. This is what family does. We take care of each other. Sometimes we make decisions you'll thank us for later." Daniel looked away for a long moment. He watched a couple outside, laughing over coffee, their hands touching lightly. Then he turned back. "No. This is what you do. You make decisions for me and call it love." Thomas didn't respond right away. His expression tightened, not guilt, but irritation. "You wouldn't be where you are without us, Daniel. Don't forget who raised you." Daniel stood up, gathering the papers slowly. "You're right. You did raise me. But I think somewhere along the way, I forgot that being raised isn't the same as being owned." He looked at his father, really looked, and said quietly, "I came here hoping for honesty. But I think I've had enough of silence pretending to be love." And then he left, leaving behind coffee that had gone cold. The apartment was quiet that evening. Too quiet. Daniel sat at the dining table, scanning emails from his bank, his face a storm behind tired eyes. Rachel stood by the sink, drying the same glass for too long. Silence stretched between them, heavy, not hostile, just full. Finally, she broke it. Not with anger. With exhaustion. "I thought marrying you meant joining a family," Rachel said softly. "Not walking into a war." Daniel looked up, startled, not because she spoke, but because of how she sounded. Worn down. Disappointed in a way that had nothing to do with him, and yet everything to do with what came with him. She sat across from him, not accusing, not dramatic, just honest. "Your sister offered to help plan the honeymoon. Remember how she said she could find us deals? She asked me to send over my travel details and card info, said it'd help with group rates or something. I didn't think twice." She paused, then added, "Last week I saw 3 unfamiliar charges from a resort in Florida. We were never there." Daniel's heart sank. He hadn't even thought to ask if they'd crossed a line with Rachel too. But now he saw it, how tense she'd been since they got back. How she'd flinched every time his phone buzzed. How she had smiled for him, quietly carrying the weight of something she hadn't known how to name. He reached across the table, gently taking her hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Rachel didn't pull away. But her eyes filled. "I don't want to feel paranoid around people who are supposed to love us. That's not family. That's survival." Daniel felt it deep in his chest. Not guilt, exactly, but a sick, dawning grief. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a pattern. One that didn't stop with him. They hadn't just used his name. They were willing to use hers too. And now he knew this wasn't going to quietly fade. It had only just begun. It was just past midnight when Daniel's phone buzzed, a quiet vibration against the nightstand. He didn't expect anyone. Most nights lately ended in silence. It was a message from Natalie. Not Monica. Not Thomas. Natalie. "Hey, I don't know how to say this, but you're not crazy." He sat up in bed, heart beginning to stir. "I know what they've done. I've seen it for years. They did the same thing to my mom before she left. I think that's why she stopped calling. Not because she didn't love us, but because she couldn't survive it." Daniel swallowed hard. Natalie had always been the quieter twin, observant, kind, easily overlooked. But now, her voice through text felt like a match struck in darkness. Another message came through. Screenshots. Conversations. between Monica and Thomas. Told strategic. One read. If we time it right, he'll never question it. Daniel always pays, he just doesn't like confrontation. Another, from Thomas. Don't ask. Just do it and tell him later. We raised him. We're entitled. Daniel stared at the screen, fingers trembling. This wasn't just a slip-up. This was organized. Deliberate. They called you their backup plan, Natalie texted, like, in case the family ever hit a wall. You were the fallback. The emergency fund. I'm sorry, Daniel. He leaned back, letting the weight of it settle into his chest. It didn't feel like a revelation. It felt like confirmation. All those years of being the responsible one. The generous one. The one who didn't cause drama. It wasn't just appreciated, it was expected. Required. Exploited. And now, thanks to Natalie, the illusion was shattered. He wasn't overreacting. He wasn't too sensitive. He was surrounded. But maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. Give it back. Thank you. You have no idea what that means right now. And for the first time in weeks, Daniel didn't feel crazy. He felt awake. Daniel didn't sleep that night. There was no dramatic music playing in the background. No thunderstorm outside. Just the soft hum of his laptop fan and the quiet clicks of a mouse, steady, determined. He opened a spreadsheet he'd never thought he'd use, titled, Contingency. A list he'd started years ago, more out of anxiety than expectation. Tonight, it became his lifeline. One by one, he began to sever the threads. The family Netflix account? Gone. Monica's phone line on his Verizon plan? Transferred, with a 72-hour notice. The joint checking account his father set up, just in case someone needed help? Cloud access to their mother's tax documents, locked out. Every fingerprint he didn't remember registering, every device he didn't recognize, removed. He moved slowly, deliberately. This wasn't rage. It was clarity. Rachel walked in quietly around 3 a.m., a blanket over her shoulders, watching him from the hallway. Is it done? She asked gently. He turned to her, the soft blue glow of the screen outlining his tired face. Almost. She sat beside him, resting her head against his shoulder. No more shared anything, he whispered, with them. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't break down. Instead, he changed every password, removed every backup contact, checked every security question for potential leaks. And when he reached the final item, access to the estate his grandparents had left him, he paused. It was still in his name. But someone had tried to access it recently from an unknown IP. He added two-factor authentication, changed the mailing address to a P.O. box, notified the firm. Digitally, emotionally, he was logging out. He looked over at Rachel, who simply reached for his hand. For the first time since they'd returned from their honeymoon, Daniel felt something he hadn't known he was missing. The kind that comes not from shutting people out, but from finally realizing who never should have had access in the first place. The morning sunlight streamed through the blinds, but Daniel didn't reach for his phone right away. Instead, a cold knot settled in his stomach as he scrolled through the notifications. There was the first post. A vague, bitter status from Monica. Some people forget who raised them. It wasn't just a message. It was a challenge, a public declaration wrapped in betrayal. Then the floodgates opened. Childhood photos, carefully chosen to paint a picture of a spoiled, ungrateful son. Monica's caption read, "He thinks money makes him better than us." Comments appeared, some sympathetic, others judgmental. The family narrative was already shifting. Rachel sat beside him, her fingers tightening around his arm. "I got a message from Monica," she whispered, her voice low. Daniel's eyes flicked down to his own screen. "A DM, he'll leave you too. Just wait." The venom in those words stung, but Daniel didn't flinch. He'd expected this. Knew the story would twist, that the truth would be buried beneath a wave of resentment and lies. But instead of reacting, he stayed silent. He didn't respond. He didn't engage. He did something else. He opened a new folder on his laptop. Screenshots, emails, access logs, messages. Every breadcrumb of evidence he had gathered so far, meticulously organized, time-stamped, irrefutable. Daniel wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was preparing. Not for a battle of words, but for the moment when the truth would finally speak louder than the noise. And in the silence between posts and accusations, he found a strange kind of strength. A quiet promise to himself. This story isn't over yet. Late into the quiet of the night, Daniel sat alone at his desk, the soft glow of the laptop screen illuminating his face. The house was still, but his mind buzzed with the weight of everything he'd uncovered. After weeks of silence and gathering proof, the time had come to speak, not just for himself, but for anyone who ever felt trapped by family ties turned toxic. He opened a blank document and began to write. When loyalty becomes a weapon, and love has conditions, that's not family. That's control. He carefully told his story. He left out names, choosing instead to focus on the pain behind the betrayal, the quiet desperation of being taken for granted, the suffocating weight of unspoken expectations. He included screenshots, timelines, emails, the hard evidence to back up his truth. With a deep breath, he hit publish on Medium and shared the link on LinkedIn, a platform where his network could see, understand, and maybe even relate. Within minutes, the notifications started pouring in. Comments flowed, strangers opening up, saying things like, "You just told my story. I never thought I was alone in this. Thank you for giving a voice to what so many of us hide." Messages from all walks of life, from people Daniel had never met, who had faced the same tangled webs of family loyalty and financial control. For the first time since this all began, Daniel felt something unfamiliar. He felt seen. Not by his family, not by the ones who used him, but by the world beyond his pain. A quiet relief settled in him, a fragile but real hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward healing. And in that moment, with his story out in the open, Daniel realized he was no longer alone. 3 days later, just as the afternoon sun dipped low, a soft knock echoed through Daniel's apartment. He wasn't expecting anyone. Heart steady but cautious, he opened the door to find Monica, Thomas, and a sharp-looking man in a suit, clearly a lawyer. Monica's face was pale, eyes glossy with tears she seemed desperate to hold back. Thomas stood stiff beside her, trying to mask his own guilt behind a neutral expression. The lawyer held out a manila envelope. Without a word, Monica stepped forward. "Daniel, we're here because we want to fix this. We brought you something." Daniel took the envelope. Inside was a notarized apology letter, carefully worded, humbling, but most importantly, real. Alongside it was the car title transfer, signed over to Daniel, the rightful owner. Monica's voice cracked as she spoke. "We messed up, Daniel. We thought we were helping, but we were wrong. Please, can we just go back to how things were before? Before all this." Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at Monica, the sister he once trusted, the family he'd fought for. Slowly, he exhaled and with calm resolve said, "You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry I didn't let you keep doing it." The words hung between them like a fragile barrier, unbreakable yet quiet. He stepped back, closing the door gently but firmly. Inside, he leaned against it for a moment, feeling the weight of years of betrayal and pain. But also a strange sense of closure. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was a boundary, a quiet statement that he was no longer the family's safety net. And in that silence, Daniel knew this was the turning point. Weeks had passed since the difficult visit at the door. The weight of old wounds still lingered, but Daniel felt a quiet peace settling in. Tonight, he and Rachel were hosting a small New Year's dinner at their apartment, a modest gathering with Natalie and a handful of close friends who had stood by him through it all. The room was softly lit, the air filled with gentle laughter and the clinking of glasses. It wasn't loud or forced, it was real. There were no hidden agendas, no whispered demands, no subtle expectations. Just people who cared, simply and honestly. Daniel watched Rachel smile across the table, saw Natalie's easy grin as she exchanged stories, and listened to the comfortable murmur of friendship. It was different from any family dinner he'd known, lighter, freer. He took Rachel's hand quietly and whispered, "This is what family's supposed to feel like." She squeezed back, her eyes reflecting relief and hope. In that moment, Daniel understood something essential. Family wasn't just about shared blood or old ties. It was about respect, trust, and the freedom to be yourself without fear. Later, as he cleaned up alone, his voice softened into a reflection. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you've ever been the bank in your family, we'd love to hear your story in the comments. You're not alone.